And I believe we are live. Well, hello and welcome to Film Thoughts with Nathanael Molnár. I am your aforementioned host, Nathanael Molnár, and this is the casual show where we just talk about whatever is on my mind in the world of film. Now, we are now doing Film Thoughts live every single Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And of course, I'm new at doing live shows, so if there's any background noise or if there are any technical difficulties, let me know in the chat, and I apologize in advance if something goes wrong, as something will most likely go wrong. So, how today's show is going to work is I have a couple of topics within the world of film that I want to talk about. Then I want to discuss some of my all-time favorite horror movies, and then we will go and look at the chat and see what you guys are talking about and what questions you may have for me. So, to start off today's show, this was some pretty big news, I thought. Pardon me. So everyone knows Universal, they put out The Mummy in 2017. They were trying to launch their Universal Cinematic Monster Universe. They called it the Dark Universe. They even had the whole opening tag to The Mummy. It's like, oh, Dark Universe, played up the whole fucking thing. And so that didn't go over so well. I didn't hate The Mummy. Like, I didn't think it was complete, like, utter trash or anything like that. But, I mean, it wasn't good. The problem with The Mummy was that they were trying to literally just do Mission Impossible. But it's supposed to be a horror movie. These should have been low-budget horror movies, not some $150 million action adventure thing with Tom Cruise. That just doesn't make any sense for what this is supposed to be. Supposed to be low budget horror. And it looks like now that is what we are going to be getting, because it was announced that Blumhouse is going to be working with Universal in order to create a new cinematic universe of the monster movies. And first, they are working on The Invisible Man with Lee Whannell, I believe is how you pronounce his name, who, of course, he wrote and directed Upgrade. Now, I was not a huge fan of Upgrade myself. I know a lot of people went crazy for that movie, but I personally didn't like Upgrade, and I didn't even think it was that well written or that well directed. So hearing that Lee Whannell is going to be doing The Invisible Man, hearing his name attached to it doesn't necessarily make me excited. But all the other factors surrounding this story does make me excited. The fact that Blumhouse, who probably should have been doing this in the first place, Blumhouse is going to be doing and you know what? Let's see if that light can go off. Does that look better? I don't know. Let's leave the light on. Let's see what happens. So the fact that Blumhouse probably should have been doing this in the first place, their specialty is low budget horror. Look at it. They did Get Out. Now they've had some movies that weren't so good, but they've had a lot of really good ones. And their specialty is low budget horror. And that's exactly what this Universal Monster Cinematic Universe should be. Because I always believed that this cinematic universe could work. You could have a cinematic universe with Frankenstein and the Wolfman and the Mummy and the Invisible Man and all these different characters. You could have a cinematic universe and it could be really good. Universal just completely fucked up the whole thing. So I'm excited to hear that Blumhouse is taking it over. I'm excited that they're kicking it off, not doing The Mummy again. I actually really like that they're not doing one of the well-known monsters. I'm glad that they're not kicking off with Frankenstein. I'm glad they're not doing Dracula again, because remember Dracula Untold or whatever the fuck it was called? That was supposed to be part of the cinematic universe. That was supposed to be the debut. And then that movie completely sucked. And so they're like, well, that can't be the debut. We'll do The Mummy first. And then The Mummy sucked. And here we are. But regardless, I'm glad that they're going with something like The Invisible Man, which isn't like the big giant IP that you would want to do or start your cinematic universe with. They're going with something smaller. And I think that is going to make for a more interesting property. I am excited that Blumhouse is doing this. I think this could be something really cool. And hopefully they'll just focus on making one good movie first, and then they'll think about their cinematic universe afterwards. But yeah, hearing this Invisible Man movie is coming, I'm pretty excited for it. All right, moving on. So remember Birds of Prey? I remember after Suicide Squad came out, after that movie came out and made ungodly amounts of money, which it never should have made because the movie is a piece of shit, in my opinion. Of course, in my opinion, I think the movie's terrible. But after Suicide Squad came out, made all this money, suddenly we had 18 different Harley Quinn projects in development. Gotham City Sirens was going for a while. They were working on a Joker movie, a Harley Quinn movie, a Harley Quinn and Joker movie, and a Harley Quinn versus Joker movie. Oh god, that was hard even just saying all that. They've been working on all of these Harley Quinn movies, and it looked like none of them were actually going to happen because about 90% of the movies DC announced wasn't going to happen. Well, it looks like one of them, Birds of Prey, actually is going to happen. We'd heard some people were added to the cast for it, especially Ewan McGregor as Black Mask, which I think is very interesting casting. But then we got this like short teaser footage. Someone said on Twitter that it looked like they just filmed like a costume fitting, which I think perfectly describes what this actually is. Because it's not a teaser, it's not a trailer in any way. It's literally filming some of the characters in costume. So does this teaser actually change at all how I feel about the movie? No. I'm not interested in this movie. I'm not interested in any of these derivative Suicide Squad films. I don't really care. I didn't like Suicide Squad myself, so I have no reason to be excited. In fact, I haven't liked a DC EU movie since Wonder Woman. And before that was Man of Steel, and that's about it. So I'm not too big on the DCU right now. I was never interested in this Birds of Prey film. But you know what? The movie may come out and it's fucking awesome. We never know. I don't think it's going to be awesome, but the movie could come out and it's the best DCEU movie. It makes more than fucking Aquaman, you know. Who knows? You never know. So the teaser doesn't do anything. It doesn't change my barometer at all because I was never that excited to begin with. And this isn't even really a teaser. It's like someone said on Twitter, it's a filmed costume fitting. So doesn't adjust anything for me. I'm still not that interested in Birds of Prey. But of course, once the movie comes out and once a trailer comes out, a real trailer, I'll watch it with an open mind. And maybe I'll watch the trailer and I go, you know what? Everything I thought about this movie out the window. That's an awesome trailer. And I completely changed my opinion. But we'll have to wait and see a trailer for that. And the last piece of news before I move into the titular part of this video is Oscar Isaac is most likely going to be joining Dune. Now, this Denis Villeneuve film, Dune, he's doing an adaptation of Dune. I believe it comes, I don't know if there's a release here, actually. If anyone's in the chat, let me know when Dune comes out, if there is a year set for it. But if it is, I would assume maybe like 2020 and 2021. That's hard to say. Right around there, I think it was probably going to come out. But I don't know if there's a year announced for it not yet. But regardless, Oscar Isaac is joining an impeccable cast. When you look at the cast that they have for this Dune movie, first of all, it's directed by Denis Villeneuve, who is one of the best new and upcoming directors working right now. He has done some incredible films. You're looking at Prisoners. You're looking at Sicario. Everyone loved Arrival. I'm not a huge fan of Arrival. And then Blade Runner 2049 was phenomenal. That was my second favorite movie of that year. So he is an absolutely brilliant director. I'm so excited just for his next project, let alone that it's something like Dune, a giant science fiction film. And he just did a giant science fiction film with Blade Runner 2049, and that turned out to be fucking incredible. So I have never read the Dune books before. I know there was like a movie before. I never really watched it. I don't know like jack shit about this property. But I'm interested because it's Denis Villeneuve. And look at this cast that they have up. They have Timothée Chalamet, who very well could have been nominated for an Oscar this year for Beautiful Boy. And so Sam Rockwell kind of took his spot. Whether it was Sam Rockwell who got it or Timothée Chalamet, I mean, they're both fantastic actors who turned in fantastic performances this year, so it's not a huge deal, but Timothée Chalamet has had a fantastic career thus far. Call Me By Your Name, Beautiful Boy. He's been in some fantastic movies. He was in Lady Bird. So the fact that he's leading this film, that gets me excited. Rebecca Ferguson from Mission Impossible. She was in Life. She's fantastic. Dave Bautista, who in the right role works perfectly. Stellan Skarsgård, who, of course, you remember him from the Thor movies, and he was in the first Avengers movie. He's a great actor, and he's always a good addition to any film. And I believe, if I'm correct, that he's playing the villain in Dune. So that should be very interesting. Charlotte Rampling is in it, and now we have Oscar Isaac, and Oscar Isaac is a fantastic actor. This cast for Dune is looking to be fantastic. It's shaping up to be one of the best casts of the coming years. And I am very excited for this film, for considering the fact I know nothing about it. I don't know anything about the plot. I don't know anything about the characters. I don't know anything about the world. The fact that I haven't read the books, the fact that I haven't seen the previous movie, anything like that. I know nothing about Dune. But I am super excited for this movie just because of the talent that they have on board and the prospect of Denis Villeneuve doing another giant sci-fi blockbuster or not really action. I don't know if Dune is action or not, but a giant science fiction film, an event film. I am very excited for this movie, and this cast is shaping up to be something quite special. So, the title of this film thoughts is some of my all-time favorite horror movies. Now, in a previous Film Thoughts episode, I talked about some of my favorite science fiction films of all time, and there might be a couple of films that overlap because there are some very, very excellent sci-fi horror movies. So there's going to be a little bit of overlap, but these are my favorite horror movies. Now, I've had a bit of an interesting relationship with the horror genre. So I never really used to be a fan of horror. I thought that horror movies were kind of conventional and they weren't usually done well. They're kind of, they're the movies with the terrible actors. And, it just, I never really got into horror movies. Then I started to go back and watch older horror movies. And some of these films are on the list. So I'm not going to say what films, but a lot of 70s, 80s, 60s horror movies. This is really like the prime of horror. And it showed me what horror can be when you have great actors and you have a great script and you have a great director and who understands what horror should be, the subtlety of horror, and the fact that there's more in not showing as much. Less is more. These are things that horror directors of the 60s, 70s, 80s really understood. And that has kind of been lost in this current age of horror films. But then we've had sort of in the last couple of years a resurgence in great quality horror movies. We had Get Out, fantastic. We had A Quiet Place, fantastic. And it's because a lot of these new horror movies are understanding the sensibilities of the horror directors of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So I went from not really liking horror to loving and appreciating horror when it's done right and being very disappointed when horror is done wrong. So we're going to take a look at some of my all-time favorite horror movies. And this is an evolving list as I always watch new movies and more movies come out. So this is going to change. And this is also in no particular order. I am just talking about some of my favorite horror movies in no particular order. The first one I want to talk about is actually one I have right here. The Babadook. Duke. Yes, it's the Babadook. This is a fantastic movie, and I don't think it gets as much credit as it deserves. The Babadook is brilliant, and I think it's brilliant because it does what some other horror movies do, but I wish more horror movies do, which is that the horror is a metaphor. The horror is metaphorical, and so therefore the horror means something more for the characters and just overall for the film itself than if it's just a regular horror movie. Because if it's a regular horror movie, the horror is just there to scare the audience. It's there to put the characters through some sort of turmoil, but it's mainly there to scare the audience. But with metaphorical horror, horror that stands for something greater and means something deeper for the characters, it transcends just being there for the sole purpose of scaring the audience, but it actually enriches the characters, it enriches the narrative. The Babadook has been a hugely influential film for me, and I can't give too many details, but I am working on a horror film myself, and the metaphorical horror of the Babadook has been incredibly influential for the short film I am developing. But I'll get into more details on that in coming months. But Uh, all that to say, The Babadook, I think, is a fantastic film. I love this movie. I think is very deliberately scary and intense, but that means something for the characters, and the characters are so well written and played and developed, and the performances in this are fantastic. It all culminates in just a really powerful film. So I really like The Babadook a lot. Next, I want to talk about. I think I also have them here. I'm just going to empty this whole shelf for you. We've got The Conjuring 1, The Conjuring 2. I want to talk about these both at the same time. These Conjuring movies that James Wan did, who is just directed Aquaman, which is in theaters right now, which I'm not a fan of. But James Wan, these movies had no right being as good as they are. They are absolutely fantastic. And James Wan really brings a level of atmosphere to the film. To these movies, he really helps set up this creepy atmosphere. And it's also the fact that it's rooted in true life. These are true stories of are they Warrens? I think their last name is Warren. They are real life paranormal explorers or investigators, probably investigators. And so these films are based on real events. And while we can get into a debate as to how true it is or what is real, what isn't, and all that, we can debate all that. But the fact that it is somewhat rooted in truth makes it even more terrifying because you're watching this film and you're just realizing this happened. Or not everything that happens in this film happened, but the characters are real. They're real people. And it brings a new dimension to the film that not a lot of other horror movies can really accomplish in the same way. The problem with I think I like The Conjuring 2. I like it a lot. I don't like it as much as the first one, and I think it's because it kind of slips into a bit of the same formula as the first one, but and it doesn't necessarily go in a new direction other than it being a new case. Uh, so I wish it had kind of taken a few more steps forward to being something different than what the first one had been. But I think these are both fantastic movies, and they're definitely some of the best representations of current new age contemporary horror films. So I love the Conjuring movies. They're some of my favorites. Next one up is the one pictured on the graphic in the thumbnail of this video, The Exorcist. Now that may sound like an obvious choice for a horror list, but that's because it has very good reason of being on that list. The Exorcist is probably, I think, my favorite horror movie of all time. And again, sounds a little cliched to say that, but it's the truth because this movie is so fucking brilliant. The Exorcist is such a well-made horror movie, and it's because it takes so much time in the beginning setting up its characters, developing its characters, putting all these narrative pieces into place, and it slowly begins to integrate the horror. And it's not really until well into the movie that the horror completely starts to escalate. And it's because the best horror movies have strong characters. Sure, they have strong direction. Sure, they have strong performances. But the best horror movies have these strong characters that you can get behind, that you can understand, that you can rally behind. And so that when the stuff starts to go down, when the horror elements are introduced, it means something more because you're actually attached to the characters. When the characters are just faceless people or just like, oh, that's the terribly written teenager who you're rooting to get killed, then the horror doesn't mean anything. Then you're rooting for the horror. It doesn't terrify you. You're rooting for it. The best horror is when you have your characters well developed and you have your characters so much so that you can understand them and you can get behind them. And so that when the horror is introduced, you're scared for the characters. You're not rooting for the horror. You're not rooting for Jason to kill the next teenager. You're rooting for the main characters, the protagonists, and it makes the horror even more terrifying because you feel the characters' fear when they encounter the horror. And I think The Exorcist takes so much time. Oh, and I also have The Exorcist back here. Yeah, I don't have all these on Blu-ray with me right now, but I do have the first few. The Exorcist takes so much time to develop its characters, so that once the horror starts to actually happen, especially once you get into the third act with the actual exorcism, it means something. It means something so much more than if they just jumped right into the horror and you never took a second to actually give a damn about the characters. The Exorcist is masterclass horror filmmaking, and I really love this movie. Every time I watch it, I appreciate it even more, and I do think it is my all-time favorite horror movie. Next up on the list is Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 film Psycho. By the way, before I keep talking any further, on our podcast here that I do on the Movie Paradise, Movie Night Tonight, if you're unaware, the basic premise is that we watch a new film each week, and then we watch the film, and then we have an hour-long spoiler discussion, just talking openly about the movie. Each month has a new theme. Back in October, we did horror movies, and so we talked about a lot of the movies on this list I'm going to be mentioning. The Exorcist was one of them, and Psycho is also one of them. So I'll let you know which ones were on that month of Movie Night Tonight, so that if you are curious to go back and listen to those episodes and get more in-depth discussion about these films, you can go ahead and do so. But yes, The Exorcist is part of that month, and so is Psycho. Psycho is fantastic. Alfred Hitchcock is one of my probably top 5 favorite directors. And it's interesting because I think the bar for me for a lot of directors is how versatile they are. How much can they do outside of their one realm? Spielberg can do so many different genres and so many different kinds of films. And a lot of other directors that I appreciate, they're not contained and limited to just one kind of film. Like James Cameron can do grand sci-fi like Terminator and Aliens, and then he can do a love story like Titanic. You know, he can branch out and do different things. Hitchcock didn't necessarily branch out. He kind of stayed within this pocket of suspense thriller films. He never did too many horror movies or pure horror movies. He had elements of horror in his films, but Psycho is one of those movies that actually had strong elements of horror, and it's a very different Hitchcock film. For the most part, like I said, he stayed within this one bubble of what he was doing, but this was one of the films that he branched out and tried something different and tried something new, and it's fantastic. The movie is fantastic. Going back to what I was talking about with the characters, developing the characters, that's going to be a theme through all these movies I talk about, because I think that is part of what makes great horror, is when you have well-developed characters. The characters in Psycho, very well developed. You understand them, you get behind them. What's great about this movie is that it keeps switching main protagonists. And I don't want to go into too many details in case if you have not seen Psycho, but all I'll leave is that throughout the narrative, the main protagonist that we're following, we keep getting tricked as to who is the main protagonist, and we keep going to someone new. And yet the film never feels empty or hollow. It doesn't feel like these characters are not developed. They still feel completely developed, and we understand them, we get behind them, even though they keep switching who is the leading protagonist. And of course, the great thing about Psycho is that it's really more of like a thriller and like a psychological thriller up until the end, in which case the twist, and I won't reveal the twist in case if you don't know, the twist is really what makes it the horror movie. And I really like that about this film. Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, fantastic horror movie. It's one of my favorites. Next up on the list is Alien, Ridley Scott's Alien. And that was another film that we talked about on Movie Night Tonight. This movie, and this is one of those that falls under sci-fi horror, because I talked about Alien for some of my favorite all-time science fiction films, and I'll talk about it for horror as well. This movie, as a horror movie, it works so well. There are great science fiction elements to this film. Of course, I think it's mostly a science fiction movie. I wouldn't say horror sci-fi, I'd say sci-fi horror, because Alien in its core DNA is predominantly a science fiction film. But the horror elements is really what helps elevate it. Even if you look to the poster, the tagline of the film is, "In space, no one can hear you scream." This movie is through and through a horror movie, and it works so well. Again, well-developed characters. You spend time with your characters, you understand who they are, and then when the shit goes down, it means something. When the alien bursts through the person's chest, and you have the chest burster, one of the greatest cinematic scenes of all time, and then it scurries off into the darkness, into the shadow, and then it grows and starts picking them off by one. The horror in this works so well, so well. So Alien is definitely one of my all-time favorite horror movies. I love that film so much. Next up, John Carpenter's Halloween. Yes, 1978. This is classic horror film. Um, John Carpenter did such a good job with this movie. And some people today might watch Halloween and think, oh, well, it's kind of cheesy. There's no blood, no gore, or anything like that. I can't really get into it. I can understand that. Fair enough. I love this movie. And really, this is when you look at the history of horror films, Halloween is such an instrumental film because Halloween single-handedly created the slasher genre. And I don't know if I've ever seen a slasher film that rivals or comes anywhere near the original Halloween. This movie, again, develops its characters very well. The horror is so effective because John Carpenter knows less is more. It knows what to show, what not to show. It knows that just shots behind Michael Myers, just showing his feet or just showing his shoulders, and all you hear is the breathing. You just hear the breathing. That in and of itself is enough. You don't need to show all this blood and gore. And the sequel that came out last year in 2018 shows a lot of blood and a lot of gore, and that works really well for that film. This one doesn't need it. And it proves that it doesn't need it because John Carpenter doesn't, unlike another film I'm going to talk about of his, he doesn't rely on the blood and the gore or anything to be terrifying in of itself. It's the atmosphere that he crafts, the mystique and the terrifying nature surrounding Michael Myers, and just how well Jamie Lee Curtis plays the role. So Halloween is one of my absolute favorite horror movies of all time. Next up, putting the director aside, Roman Polanski, Rosemary's Baby is a fantastic movie. Is Roman Polanski a piece of shit? Yes, he absolutely is. But let's put that aside right now and just talk about the film Rosemary's Baby. One of the most influential horror movies of all time, and it's one of the best too. It does such a great job of escalating, building tension throughout the whole film. It's building and it's building and it's building and it's building all the way up to this climactic moment. And we don't really see what it is, but it's the reaction of the character who has seen what is going on and knows what it is that makes it so terrifying. Again, less is more. Roman Polanski, as a director, knows what to show and what not to show. It knows when to show just a little bit to get you intrigued, to get you hooked, and then when to hold back and let your imagination take over. It's such a well-crafted film. It's so well done. And like I said, it was a hugely instrumental horror film in the development and the evolution in the maturation, rather, of the horror genre. So Rosemary's Baby absolutely has to be talked about. Next up, we have M. Night Shyamalan's The Sixth Sense. This is such a great horror movie. And I feel like I'm being like a bit repetitive with how many times I say it, but it absolutely needs to be repeated. It comes down to the characters. Bruce Willis gives a fantastic performance in this. Haley Joel Osment gives probably one of the best, if not the best, child actor performance I have ever seen. And I have overstated on this channel how much I usually detest child actors and how I think when child actors suck, it can sink the movie. Haley Joel Osment he isn't just okay, he isn't just tolerable or fine, he elevates the film. He makes it even better. And he did such a fantastic job with this movie. Toni Collette, excellent in this. All the performances across the board are fantastic. And again, for Shyamalan, this is his crown jewel of a film. This is his masterpiece. And it's unfortunate to see that I don't think he's really ever going to be able to make anything anywhere near the level of The Sixth Sense again. I This movie's so great. And again, it kind of adopts this less is more. It builds suspense using just little things. And when you go back and you look and see how much detail and how much craft went in, specifically looking at Shyamalan's use of the color red and how much he used the color red for one very specific purpose in this film, and anything that had nothing to do with that purpose that was red, he immediately got it out of the movie. He like I was reading about how someone would show up and there was like a little bit of red and something in the background of a shot, and he'd be like, "Nope, get it out," because red is only supposed to be about this. And it's details like that and craft like that that paired with a fantastic script, great characters, and great direction, which are things that I don't get to say about Shyamalan anymore. But he made this movie so great, and this is such a fantastic movie. It's one of my all-time favorite films. It's definitely one of my all-time favorite horror movies. Next up is another John Carpenter thing, which we also talked about on our horror month of movie night tonight, and that is The Thing. It's funny to look at The Thing and Halloween because Halloween is famous for, or infamous for, having no blood and no gore. The Thing is famous for all of its blood and all of its gore. And it shows that no two movies need the exact same thing or the exact same approach, even when they're from the same director. Halloween works better, the original Halloween works better without blood and gore, and it relies more on character and atmosphere. The Thing works better with the blood, with the gore, and that adds to the film. If there was no blood and no gore in The Thing, I don't think it would work as well. And if there was more blood and more gore in the first Halloween, I don't think it would work as well. And it just shows, even with the same director doesn't even need to have the same approach to the two same films. Uh, each film calls for its own thing, its own approach, and its different approach. And I think looking at Halloween and looking at The Thing, I think that makes itself very apparent. The Thing is fantastic. It's honestly a terrifying film. It does such a great job of. It doesn't have strong character development, I'll say, but you get behind your characters and you like the characters. You get behind them very easily. It doesn't necessarily like take the characters from one spot to another. Doesn't necessarily evolve them, other than their evolution of their approach to dealing with this creature, this thing, whatever it may be. That's really the only thing that evolves and changes. But the characters themselves don't necessarily have strong development or strong depth. But in the case of this film, it works nonetheless. And I think it's a case similar to what I was just saying about the approach of Halloween versus The Thing. Not every horror movie needs to have strong, well-developed characters and strong and well-developed character development and character depth. Not every film needs to have that. I think in most cases, it works for the film that the movie can only be improved by giving greater detail to the characters and greater depth and development to the characters. But not every movie needs to have it. And it's a case by case scenario with these films. And The Thing is an instance where it doesn't need to have that development, doesn't need to have that depth, because it's the other elements of the movie that make it as superior and rise above as it is. The practical effects in The Thing, unparalleled by any movie. Unparalleled. I can't think of another movie that comes anywhere close in the degree of practical effects, how effective they are, how detailed they are, how obscure they are, and just how overall how effective they are. I can't think of another movie that goes anywhere near The Thing with that. And then the horror of the practicality of the effects. It gives the actors something tangible and real to act off of. And so it makes the performances even more genuine. And when the performances are more genuine and you have something tangibly there in the screen that you're not just looking at and saying, oh, well, that's just CGI or whatever, when it makes it a more immersive experience and you get into it more because you understand this is real. This is a real thing in front of me right now. And this is real time reaction from the actors. It makes it more immersive. It makes it a better experience. I So I think the practical effects in The Thing go unparalleled. Next up, and nearing the end here, 1982's Poltergeist. This movie is excellent, and it's one of these films that I think we kind of know now as the traditional model for how to make a horror movie. But Poltergeist was one of these films that really spearheaded that model, which is, you have the opening of the film where everything is okay. You have a family, maybe there's some drama within the family, but you have the family. And then little things start to happen, and the parents are like, oh, that's strange. This is happening. This wasn't there before. Why is that light flickering? Nobody really notices or cares about what's going on. Slowly it ramps up and ramps up until, now we're past the point of no return in terms of the horror. And then you get the giant, big climax of the film. And then there is the new state of what those characters are like after the horror. Poltergeist does that, and it does it so well. One of the biggest moments of Poltergeist is when you have the chairs. You leave the room, the chairs are normal, and then you come back in, and the chairs are all stacked. Wow, it gives you chills. It's the subtlety of it. It doesn't necessarily. It's not in your face with a lot of the use of horror or the changes that happen or anything like that. It's not in your face at all. It's very subtle, and it's just little things. Like even just seeing something in one place and then the next shot it's somewhere else. That is enough to be scary and be terrifying and build tension. We don't need any grand displays of demons and creatures and monsters and all that. And we do get some of that later on in the film, but we don't need all that, at least not all up front, for it to be terrifying. It's the slow building escalation of the horror from the beginning to the end that really just makes it such a great film. And the last film I'm going to talk about before I take a look at the live chat is a movie that is turning 20 years old this year, and that is Blair Witch Project. I wanted to include this because this is a very different kind of horror movie. Of course, and hold on, I'm going to take 1 second. Sorry. I had my window open, but some dogs were barking, so I didn't want to hear that. So anyways, sorry about that. What was he talking about? Blair Witch. So Blair Witch is a very different kind of horror movie because it's found footage, unlike any of the other movies on here. And I know that the found footage subgenre or genre or whatever you want to refer to it as, it's kind of become disgraced and overtired and overdone in the last number of years. All these movies after Blair Witch tried to do found footage, and no one did it nearly as well as the first Blair Witch. And people just got completely sick of found footage movies, and then they pretty much all but died out. But Blair Witch, there's a reason why everybody wanted to do a found footage movie after Blair Witch. And that's because Blair Witch did it so well. The movie, not much happens in this movie, really at all. Not much happens at all. You don't really see much. You don't really see anything. It's all about the fear of the characters. And it's for such a low budget film, like definitely under $1 million. I forget how much it was actually made for, but it was in the thousands, I believe, not the millions. The actors, they weren't even like any like known actors at all. They were unknown. I think they were honestly probably just like maybe just out of college, students right around there, who wanted to make something. And it's so fucking effective. It works so goddamn well. The whole movie, just little things here or there, little things that just pop up, and it builds and it builds and it builds. And it works so well. And then it gets to the end, you don't see anything, and you feel everything. It's really, honestly, it's kind of weird to think about it, but I have to say, Blair Witch is like masterfully crafted film. It's great filmmaking. They did a fantastic job making that movie, and no found footage movie, especially no horror found footage movie, has ever been able to recapture what the Blair Witch Project did. And remember when that movie was premiering, I think it was at Sundance. When it was premiering, they were making everyone believe that this was real. They were putting around posters saying like, "Have you seen these people?" And I had the actors from the film, and they were trying to convince everyone that those actors had disappeared in the woods and no one had ever seen them. And then suddenly, oh, this footage showed up, and it was the movie, and they were trying to convince people it was real, and people believed it was real until it was revealed it was a film. People believed it was real. That's how fucking scary this was, and that's how well done it was. Was that people would watch this and they thought it was genuine, that they thought it was real. And tell me another found footage horror movie where anyone could watch it and think, "Oh yeah, this is real life." No, you're not going to find it anywhere else. Blair Witch Project is fantastic. So I am going to hop over to this live chat. Let's see what's going on here. Ah, yes. Our good friend Rob Jaginta in here as well. Let's take a look at what he says. I love The Conjuring. I love The Conjuring too. When is the Serenity review coming out? I have not seen it yet. At this point, I don't know. So I've talked about on the show before how when I'm home, I have AMC A-List, and I love it, and I get to go see as many movies as I want. When I'm at school, I don't have an AMC anywhere near me. I don't get to use AMC A-List, so that means when I want to see films here at school, I have to pay out of pocket, which means that I very much have to narrow down the movies that I do see and the movies that I don't see. However, I have a rewards card for the local theater that's just about like a 2-minute drive away from me here at school. And so I built it up. I think I have like a free ticket on that rewards card. So I was going to go use it and go see Serenity this past weekend, but I got busy and I didn't get a chance. I don't know if I'll get a chance this weekend, and I don't have a ton of free time during the week. So I don't have a lot of free time to go see movies in the theaters here. I mean, I would like to see Serenity. I'm hearing interesting things about it. I'm hearing that the twist ending, excuse me, is very polarizing. We're hearing a lot of divisive things about that ending. I'd be curious to see it. I'd be curious to put out a review. I don't know if it's going to happen though or not. Don't say Babadook like that again. It's tacky and I hate it. Oh wait, how was it that I said it? Babadook, Duke, Duke. If you've seen the film, you know what that means. It is tacky. I'm sure you do hate it, but that's why I'm doing it. I'm not gonna read that one. Are you saying ghosts aren't real? Honestly, I don't know if ghosts are real or not. I think a lot of people say, and this is unrelated to the film, this is my personal opinion. A lot of people say, are either like, "Oh yeah, ghosts are definitely real," and they'll talk about things that happen to them with ghosts, and I don't know, some of that just seems strange. And then there are people who are adamant that ghosts don't exist, and I'm like, well, how can you honestly be adamant about something not existing? Like, I don't know, that seems strange to me. Like there should be, I don't know, I just don't understand being so firm in believing that something does not exist when there's no possible way for you to have all the evidence and know everything there is to know definitively whether or not something absolutely does not exist. There's always the chance that something exists that you don't know about. There's always the chance, however improbable it is, there's always the possibility that something does exist or that something is out there. So I just can't get behind being so completely 100% adamant that something does not exist. Do I believe ghosts are real? Not actively, but I mean, I do think that maybe rather like there can be a blending of different, the spiritual and the metaphysical and the physical. I don't know. Here's what I'll say. This is it kind of caught me off guard, the question, so I don't have a firm answer, nor have I ever really been asked if I believe in ghosts. But I'll say this. I don't think what people claim ghosts are what ghosts are, but I think that if you're saying there is no chance that there are spirits or that ghosts exist or anything paranormal exists, I think that is being naive. So that's not a firm answer. it's middle of the road, but that's all I got. Let's see. Have you ever conducted an exorcist? I think you mean an exorcism. An exorcist conducts an exorcism. Also, could you not swear on your channel? My cousin, little Nikki, loves your content, but his mom won't let him listen because you swear. Well, little Nikki, let me talk to you directly. That's some tough shit. Sorry to hear that. You know what? Fuck your mom. Listen to me. Listen to me. I have no problem swearing on my channel. I will. So if you have sensitive ears, I don't want you here. New Josh Gad dog movie trailer review. They made another one of these. I didn't even watch the trailer. I didn't. This is like the fourth dog movie in the last like year. We had A Dog's Purpose. Then we had A Dog's Way Home. So this is the third one. Now this is, I don't even know what this is. A dog's something. I don't fucking know. They need to stop. Stop making these dog movies. I don't need to know the inner thoughts of dogs. I don't need to watch dogs running around doing shit. I don't. I don't care. I didn't need to see a dog die like 17 times in a Dog's Purpose. I didn't need to see. I already saw A Dog's Way Home in the trailer because they showed the whole fucking movie in that trailer. I don't need to see this. I'm not watching the trailer. I don't give a shit. I like Josh Gad. I don't give a shit if he's voicing a role or if he's doing anything in this movie. I really don't give a shit. I'm done with these dog movies. I'm so sick of seeing the trailers for these. I want nothing to do with it. If they try to do like a dog cinematic universe and have 12 of these come out a year, God bless them if it makes money, but fuck, I don't want to see any more trailers. Who's your least favorite director? That's a good one. That's a good one. Least favorite director. I don't know. That's a really tough one. I mean, I have directors who I don't necessarily get excited for their work. Like, I used to get excited for Shyamalan's stuff. I'm not a fan of his stuff anymore. He's made some, excuse me, he's made some masterpieces. So I don't think I can necessarily qualify him as my least favorite, but he's definitely one who's kind of fallen on my good grace. I mean, that's hard to say. I'll have to think about it, and I'll let you know if I come up with something. But there are definitely directors who I don't get excited for. David Ayer is one who I don't really get excited. I used to get excited for his stuff. I don't get excited for his stuff anymore. Let's see. New Halloween was better. Don't at me. Well, I'm adding you. No. Halloween, the new Halloween was fantastic. It was in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. I loved that movie. I thought it was a perfect sequel to the original. I thought it had great callbacks to the first one, but without just referencing it for the sake of referencing it. It had shots that mirrored the first one, but it was inverted and it was done differently. And the way that they did it actually said something about the characters rather than just, oh, look, guess what? You loved that shot so much in the first Halloween. Guess what? We've got it in this one. It actually meant something for the characters. It actually meant something for the movie. It wasn't just fan service or something like that. And I think the horror elements were really great. This one had a lot of blood and a lot of gore. First one doesn't have that, and that works for that film. This one, the blood and the gore work excellently. I think this perfectly was a great sequel to the first one. I think it accents the first one and it complements it so well. And I will say I like the first one more, but this one's great. This is a great one. So I really like the new Halloween. Chronicle was excellent. So I'm sure you're probably talking about when I was saying I'm not a big fan of the found footage movies. Chronicle was one that did it very well. So we had a span of probably about maybe 10, maybe 15 years where we just got a ton of found footage movies. A lot of them were shit. There were a few good ones. Chronicle was a great one. I really liked that one a lot. It's not a horror found footage necessarily. It's a superhero found footage, which that I really liked. I liked there was a different angle on found footage. It was doing something different with found footage that we hadn't seen before. That was a really good movie. So yeah, I definitely like Chronicle a lot. Paranormal Activity movies are really good and effective. The first three. I have not seen the Paranormal Activity films. I know a lot of people like the first one. I think, or at least the impression that I have from gauging people's reactions is that after the first one, it kind of dies off or dips in quality. You say the first three. That's definitely one at some point I want to check out. But yeah. Thoughts on Hollywood getting hooked on, I'm assuming you mean stories about people hitting their heads and waking up in wacky situations. Yeah. What the fuck, Hollywood? What the fuck? How many of these goddamn movies do we have to see? Literally, I don't remember what movie it was, but I sat down in the theater and literally there had to have been 3 or 4 trailers back to back that all had the same exact premise where there's a character, the character bumps their head, and then suddenly they're in a romantic comedy, like that movie Rebel Wilson. Or character bumps their head and suddenly they can hear men's thoughts, like the Taraji P. Henson movie, What Men Want. They bump their head and suddenly they're a little girl, like in that movie Little. There are all these movies coming out where people are bumping their heads and suddenly they just wake up in this new world or whatever. And they're like all happening in the span of like 2 months. It's strange. I don't understand it. It is very strange. I'm getting a little. I mean, I haven't seen any of these movies yet. I don't think any of them actually come out, but I'm already getting sick of them. At least seeing them advertised. It's interesting how that can work out. That we can get all these movies with a very similar premise or a similar idea from which the story is spawned from. All come out in like the same like month or month and a half window. It's very strange how that can just happen like that. But it has. So Cloverfield 2. Yeah, Cloverfield. All right. The first Cloverfield, I like. I think it's good. Especially in terms of some of other found footage movies. It's certainly better than those. I don't think it's anything special. Like, I don't think it's anything great. I love 10 Cloverfield Lane, which of course that wasn't a found footage movie, but I absolutely love that movie. The first Cloverfield's good. Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's not anything, like I said, it's not anything fantastic, but yeah, I like that movie. I wouldn't necessarily put that as a great example of the greatness of found footage, and what like all the possibilities and capabilities the genre of found footage can have. Because look at Cloverfield. I would never say that. I would say that with Blair Witch. I'd probably say that with Chronicle, but I wouldn't say that with Cloverfield. But yeah, Cloverfield's a good movie. Gallows. Oh, the Gallows, was that? That was found footage, wasn't it? That was. Oh, I don't remember what year that was. I didn't see that one though. I remember the trailers for it, and I remember it did not look good at all. So I never went and saw it. But yeah, I guess that was found footage. So I'm assuming if you're putting in the chat, that means that you thought it was good. So yeah, maybe that's one worth checking out at some point. Would you trust Paul Blart with your life? Would I trust Kevin James as Paul Blart with my life? No. And here's why. He has proven that when he is around alcohol, he will get drunk and drink margaritas and do karaoke. And I don't really want someone protecting my life if the second that they find a karaoke bar, they're going to get drunk and start doing karaoke. I don't want someone who, if he doesn't have a lollipop with him at all times, that he's going to drop dead. I wouldn't really want that person guarding my life. And also, I mean, really, like a Segway, like that's not the greatest thing to like drive around on. So I would say definitively no. I would not trust Paul Blart with my life. And Rob adds in the chat, never seen Gallows, lol. So I guess neither of us have seen Gallows, so neither of us can definitively say whether that was a good use of horror found footage or not. So that's looking like that's the end of the chat. So I think that is going to conclude this installment of Film Thoughts. Make sure to join us on Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the next installment of Film Thoughts with Nathanael Molnár live. So yeah, that's going to do it for this installment of Film Thoughts. Thank you so much for listening and watching and joining us live. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe for more content. Be sure to follow us on all of our various social medias at Movie Paradise 99. And until our next installment of Film Thoughts on Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, thanks for watching. End the stream.